In your kit, you will have the garment pieces, you will have embroidery floss, a needle, and then you will need scissors. So first we separate the embroidery floss. I just use one strand at a time. They come with, I believe, 6 strands together. It takes a little bit to get them apart, but it comes off actually pretty easily. I put the 2 ends together. Sometimes I have to, wet it and then put it through the whole of the needle together. And then you'll have a loop at the other end. So here's a practice of the back stitch just on like a ribbon, just to do a tutorial quickly on how to backstitch. First I take a bite and I go through the loop to tie it off so there's not a fat knot there. And when I started this one, I did do 1 stab stitch, which is what that is right there. And then I go back to the beginning where the stitch came out last. So I go back and I meet that last stitch. And then I come out on the other side of that string right there. So that string will be right in the middle of the stitch. So I go back, meet that last stitch, and come out equal sides of that string right there. And then just repeat that. And it makes the stitch a lot stronger, and the possibility of it coming undone or breaking, you can fix it easier. So I'm going back and I am starting right at the last stitch, coming out equal parts of the string in the middle. And take your time to practice this before you start doing the garment. You want to take little small bites of fabric, little stitches, so that it will sew together really nicely. Then here is the garment bodice. I have the right sides together of the tree fabric, and this is only the bodice, and then this is the lining, and the lining goes right on top like that. And we're going to sew those right sides together. This piece, the bigger piece, of course, is the skirt. So first I'm going to sew the center back around the neckline and then down the other center back. I also did the armholes, as you can see here. This is an armhole right there. And center back, neck, and center back armhole. And then I'm going to clip into it so that it's going to have a better turn. When you turn it right side out, it doesn't pull funny. Really on the curves you need to clip it. The straight parts, not so much, maybe just a 1 or 2. I also cut out the tip of the corner there so it has less bulk. But see, the center back doesn't need it because it's just a straight stitch right there. The neckline, the armhole, and the center back neckline all need little cuts. And I cut it pretty close to the stitching, but obviously you don't want to go beyond the stitching. And you do want to be careful when you turn it right side out so that it doesn't pull, the stitches out. You might have to do a repair if you do cut it too much, but odds are I think you probably would do a good job. So just take your time, do little clips all around, and you will be so much happier that you did this step. And don't mind my gloves. My hands were chapped from the dry air, so I was just trying to make it look a little bit nicer in my video. So I did use these tweezers. They didn't work out as well as I thought. So I would recommend instead to use like a pencil, but use the eraser side, to push it through. You definitely don't want to push anything through it like a pair of scissors or like what I'm doing here with these tweezers. Probably not a good choice, but I was trying to be gentle with it and push it through. But you might end up pushing a hole through it if you use something sharp like that. And then just take your time to turn it right side out. I use a straight pin to pull out that corner in the center back at the neckline so that it is nice and pointed there as much as it can be. And then kind of press it all down. So now I'm taking the side seams. So the side seam of the lining piece and the side seam of the tree fabric, matching up the underarm, where they were sewn together right there. So you can put a straight pin in there, and then you're going to sew that side seam together, and then it hides all of those inside, all the seam allowances inside, which I'll show in the end. Then this is, of course, the skirt. So you take one of the long edges and you do a stitch this is called a gather stitch or a running stitch or a basting stitch. You know, it has lots of names, but basically you're taking big bites of fabric and making this running stitch along there so you can gather it. And you definitely want to gather it nicely, not too big of stitches, then it will just kind of look more like tucks. I'm trying the bodice on my doll and to see where I'm going to put the snap, and then I'm going to mark it. I like to do right over left. I don't know, that's just how I did it, but really doesn't matter. You can do either or. I'm marking actually the center back, so right at her center back on both the underlap and the overlap, so that you know where to start and stop your skirt and where they will meet in the back. So that's where the snap's gonna, where it lies together. So now I know how much to gather. I fold the waistline in half. I mark the center front of the skirt, and then I'm gonna also mark the center front of the bodice. And that's basically all the measurements you really need because it's such a small garment. You don't need to have the side seams. Obviously, the side seams of the bodice are where the sewing is under the arm, right there. So I'm just marking the center front. It makes it a lot easier. And then I'm going to start and stop it at the center back. And that's where those marks were before, where the center back is. So that the skirt will meet in the back. You will see at the end how it looks and it'll make sense. So you don't gather it all the way to the edge. You want to gather it starting and stopping at the center back of the garment. So I'm going to take the bodice and put it right sides together with the skirt, marking and matching center front. And then where it starts and stops are those other marks. I picked out a couple stitches so that I could fold back the seam allowance, and that's about all you need to do. I didn't tack that down either. And then I folded a tiny bit back, and then I'm matching it to the center back of the bodice and pinning it there on both sides. And that way it finishes it very nicely. And it's just like that extra little step that you took to find the center back. And I guess I'm only really like folding back like 1/4 of an inch, if even that. Whatever the seam allowances is going to be, which is 1/4 of an inch, yeah. So then I put the pin there and gather it, and just make sure you don't pull the the thread out on the other side by accident. So first I just gather it to make sure it's the same size, and then I move the gathers around evenly and make it look nicer. So first you just need to get the right amount gathered up, and then you can adjust the gathers as need be. And definitely do this step before you sew the center back of the skirt, because that makes it so much harder to do it that way. Easy is always best, right? So I'm doing that on the other side. I'm adjusting the gathers. This is not very stiff of a fabric, although the print can make it kind of stiff sometimes and make it more difficult to gather, but this seems to be laying down just fine. So there we go. And then we're just going to sew right there, which I did, of course, another back stitch. And that's what it looks like. Yay. So then we're going to sew the center back of the skirt. And you can decide how far up you want to go. You don't want to go all the way up, but yeah, like stop right there. You just want to be able to get the doll's hips in and out, which, there's plenty of room with the Blythe doll. But just make sure that you're matching it all up nicely, and then just sew that center back. And now we're going to do a hem. And I used the pink thread on all of this so you were able to see my sewing. So I'm doing a quick knot. If you want to, rewind this and pause it and watch my steps of how I sew a knot onto the end of a thread. It's kind of a costumer's like quick knot making, like a backstage fix, So I'm going to fold up, I think it's about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And since the skirt is small, I can just hold it on my hand and hold the right amount down. And I take a little bite of fabric, of course, anchor the knot behind, there so you don't see it, and take little bites of fabric starting at that seam. And the whole reason being is this is a hidden hem stitch, so you don't necessarily really want to see it on the right side. You want to see just maybe a little tiny bite of the fabric. And with the matching thread, you won't see it. So I'm going just a little bit above where it came out on the hem, took a tiny bite of fabric. And you don't want to pull it so tight either. You want to pull it just enough and then go equal amounts out. Whatever it is, you just want to make it even. You want to make it the same amount of space between each stitch, and it will look really nice. And if you take that tiny little bite, most likely you won't be able to see the thread. And if you use white thread with something like this, you could go in and make little dots with black marker, like fabric marker, to hide the white parts of the stitching if you wanted to. Not necessary, I don't think. Some people are particular about that, but I feel like it's fine. So you can barely even see, you can see tiny little pink dots there, but with a matching thread, you really wouldn't be able to notice. So this is a nice hem stitch if you didn't want to do it where you stab stitched it or sewed it on the machine or whatever. Totally up to you, but I kind of like the hidden hem. I think it looks nice. So you can see the little dots there, but they're so small you don't really notice them. And there it is. Yay, she's so cute and finished. You just have to do the snap at last. And I do fold up that seam allowance from the waist and kind of tack it down a little bit just so it doesn't flop around and, And you can see here, if it's folded over, now the skirt matches up at the center back nicely. And it's right where it needs to be. So I'm marking again where it's going to overlap too. And then I'm going to just sew that one snap on there. Now note, some kits have 2 snaps, some have 1. Depending on the size of the snap, you might need 2. Most likely you just need 1 kind of closer to the top. And yeah, it would work just fine. So I am putting 2 on here, and I'm still using pink thread so you can see, but I'm sewing it to that seam allowance so it kind of does 2 things at once. It's holding the snap on and it's sewing up that waist seam allowance. You just want to make sure you don't go through the outer layer of the fabric, so you don't want to see it, don't want to see the stitching on the outside of the dress, just kind of taking bites of that lining. Each hole of the snap, I go through, I think 3 times. So it's 1, 2, and then on the third one, I make it over to the other hole of the snap. And I'm just taking bites of the lining. You can do like one bite or one stab stitch through both layers of the lining and the outside fabric. As long as it's a tiny dot, same thing, to kind of anchor it in place so it doesn't move around or doesn't pull too much on the lining. Although with a doll's dress, it doesn't really, become a problem. That's more of like people clothes. So only 3 stitches on each hole. And then when I'm done, I'm just making sure I'm not sewing through the other side. I see right there is 1 stab stitch, just to anchor it in place so it just lays nicer, but so small that you really don't notice it. And don't pull too tight or it'll, kind of bunch up and give you a little pucker there. And then I'm going to take a bite of just the lining and go up to where the other snap is going to be. So I don't have to tie off my thread and start a new knot and make more of a mess. You can just sew over to where, your next snap is going to be. So as you can see, I'm sewing on the male side of the snap on top, and then the female snap will go on the other side, and I will show you how I match that up. And I'm taking 1, 2, 3 bites just so you can see how I do it. 2. Well, I guess that was 2. And then the third one, I went over to the other side. And I just take a little bite and I wrap that thread around and then just tie it off like that. You don't want to make too much of a big knot. It will just, be bulky and not pretty. But of course, always just try your best. So I'm doing that little knot where I sew it to the bottom. And I'm going to sew up that waist seam allowance to keep it in place. And you have to remember the female portion of the snap is going to actually sew onto the right side of the fabric. So on the side that has the tree fabric on this dress in particular. So first I'm just whipping down the seam allowances to make it look nicer, only to the lining, not to the outer fabric. And you can go as far as you want to. You can do the whole thing if you want to, but I think that is not necessary. And then I am going to lay the top over to where I had pinned it, where it's going to finish. And this is a little tricky. I take the female snap and I kind of lay it where it's going to snap. I want the waist to look nice, to finish off correctly, and then I hold it on there because I just marked it with the male snap where it's going to be. You can also mark it with a little pencil mark or something like that, where the male snap is going to go into the female snap. So you can just put a little mark there if that's easier for you. And then you know where to line it up. And there I am just sewing the 2 knots at the end. And it's still attached because I'm just going to sew up to the next one. So I'm going to snap that bottom one. Sorry, it's a little blurry right here. And I'm going to see where is the next one going to lay, right there. And so, like I said, it is tricky, but you just have to try. And it doesn't always have to work out perfectly. You just get better in time with stuff like this. But if you take your time to, line it up nicely and all of that, you can even use a straight pin to line it up like where the male snap, lines up to on the other side. And this is just how I do it too. I feel like it is better with the male on the top of the snap. And voila, there you go. Finished garment. And let's see her. Oh, she's so cute. And yes, I love it. I hope you guys have fun sewing. Just let me know if you need any help or have any questions at all. I'm always available. Thank you.